Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another MIDF conversation, where we host a lunchtime conversation between MIDF and captains of industry and thought leaders. This is a keto lunch for the intellect. No carbs, no starch, just the good stuff. Pure protein and some greens as food for thought. I would like to welcome all our participants this afternoon, the entrepreneurs, CEOs, fund managers, and finance and business professionals, the individual investors investing their own hard-earned money, members of the media, students, especially those studying math or economics, and I welcome particularly those from UUM, colleagues, and everyone. I'm delighted that we have with us today my friend, the founder and chairman of Venturous Group, math wizard, and investor extraordinaire, Mr. Benson Tam. Benson, welcome to MIDF Conversations.
Hi.
Hi, Benson.
Aaron.
Good to see you. Great video, by the way. I mean, that really brings it home, you know, how China is the 21st century and China is the future, and all of us have to catch up. So thank you for being here. Now, Benson, I'm going to embarrass you a little bit and tell people how we met. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've known Benson since school. We went to a small school in the middle of the Oxfordshire countryside, and we were in the same math class run by a Mr. Axby, I think. And you know, it was a advanced math class, and most of us were thinking, you know, how do we get an A in this? And Benson, of course, would finish the homework during the lesson and get it 100% right. And Benson, you really made me feel, you know, very unmathematical, because what Benson could do as well is, you know, when you sat for exams, you were supposed to choose, I don't know what, 3 questions out of 5 or 5 out of 7 or something. Benson would finish all of the questions in half the time and get them all 100% right. And you know, the math teachers was terrified of him. So Benson, I mean, you really altered my worldview actually when I first met you in terms of math and everything else. But you know, thank you for being on this conversation. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to talk a little bit with Benson about how he started investing and more importantly, I think what he thinks about China in the future. So, Benson, let's just start a little bit. So, after you was math genius, you went to university. What happened after that? How did you get into investing?
Well, I took a long time to find my calling because I know I like maths. I started doing civil engineering, realized that I'm not physical enough. So I started doing software engineering. So I did a master's degree there. Well, and then realized that you can't make a living back then using software. It was too early days. So I followed the traditional route and become a financial engineer. So I'm an accountant. I worked in an investment bank and then came back to Asia in about 1990. And discovered what was then a pioneering area, which is private equity. So that was 30 years ago, Charan, and
wow.
Away we go. You know?
And now you're there. So I know you spent some time in Malaysia, and we'd like to talk about that. And you still have some friends from those days, some of whom have tuned in to watch you today. But let's really talk about the elephant in the room, which is China and tech, right? So here we get our news. Well, certainly I get my news from the Western media. You watch Bloomberg, CNN, you read Financial Times, you read the Wall Street Journal, and you consume all news from there. Things look terrible in China, right? Evergrande, there's going to be a property bubble. All the banks are going to go bankrupt. All property prices are going to collapse. They're going to crack down on the internet, and the days of Alibaba and WeChat and Tencent are over because the government's going to take over everything and stop everything. And on top of that, China today may suddenly decide to be more militaristic than it has in the past and do all kinds of things. So it does not look like a good time to invest in China or in general, or China tech. But here you are telling us that it is time.
Yes. Well, let's talk about that. And I've been living in China for the last 20 years. I moved there in 2002. Basically entirely at the same time doing internet and technology. So I guess in that sense, I have a ringside seat, and I've seen how China has transformed in the last 30 years, because my first trip to China was in 1991, exactly 30 years ago. The first thing to understand all of that is it's very easy to misunderstand China when you only take one moment in the long arc of development in China. China started the opening up and, in a sense, transformation about 40 years ago. It started in Shenzhen. And I quote from, Deng Xiaoping, where he said, "To get rich is glorious," basically encouraging people to to be adventurous, to try something new, and see what works in Shenzhen. Now, that was 40 years ago. And the way that I say to people is that the pendulum really swung a long way off to get rich is glorious. So much so that you have people who are making gazillions, put it this way. And for the past 40 years, one of the reasons why China developed so fast is they say, hey, wait a minute, let them try it first. Let's not regulate them, just let's go with it, okay? So it was basically a free-for-all for 40 years. So now after 40 years, they say, look, I think we're getting to a stage where the pendulum has swung too far and where the middle class is in a lot of stress, properties, education costs, and other reasons. So that's why they say, maybe it's time that we do something for the middle class. Maybe we level the playing field again, instead of just making it free for all, start to regulate things. That's the context of the so-called regulation. That's the first point. The second point I want to say is, for people who are inside of China, this is not new. In terms of the regulation of the property, it's been happening in the last 5 years. My property development friends have been aware of that and has been, in a sense, deleveraging, except that you have some that are, in a sense, too big to really come back down, because, in a sense, they're hooked on increasing that. That's why you see the Evergrande of today. The excesses of the 40 years is now being reeled back. So it's not suddenly that somebody says, okay, let's go back to the bad old days, put it this way. That's not the case. It's that the pendulum swung too far, so they're coming back. And first of all, as I say, this is really to give the middle class a much better chance and de-stressing them. I came from Hong Kong. I lived in China for 20 years. I know how painful it is for Hong Kongers who can't even afford their own homes, even if you have two, let's say, legal professionals who are well-to-do middle-class people. The second point I also want to make, Sharon, is that this is what I call a mass migration to the digital economy.
Wow.
Meaning that everybody heard about Alipay and Tencent Pay. Everybody pays with that. What it really means is that if you now go to China, any of the cities, not just the big cities, even the small cities, chances are every single transaction you make, every single economic activity you do is online. So I sometimes tell people, the old digital economy started in China specifically in December 2019. And what we are now seeing is that the government helping everybody to migrate from traditional economy to digital economy. But of course, just like, the days when the new immigrants migrated to the new continent, you want that to be a level playing field. You don't want somebody to be a monopolistic company that, in a sense, charge all the newcomers a fee, whatever you call it, okay? So anti-monopoly is crucial for this new digital economy that everybody is migrating to. And the other part, the part that a lot of people, in a sense, misread is, of course, when you do this, you have to do the data privacy as well. A lot of people, data privacy, anti-monopoly, exactly what the West is doing as well, right? So with that, I say mass migration de-stressing the middle class. That's what is really happening. And for all the audience today, don't think of China as a country. Because I'm an investor, I look at it, analyze it as a company.
A company.
Effective, right? Are the customers happy? 1.4 billion people, all their customers are pretty damn happy. The last survey says 90% of them are happy. Now, I would also say this, when you start looking at this as a company, President Xi is almost like the CEO. And yes, in every single company, there is a leader, and he is acting very leaderish right now. Number two, they do have a business plan. It's always been there. The 14th five-year plan, read it and read it and read it again, because everything that they're doing now has been summarized inside it. And even I went back and said, oh, maybe I missed some of it. The intention is there, and they are very execution oriented. And that's why, for example, when they say 2030 carbon peak, they do mean it. So that's the context. And that's why I kept saying that I think most people have misread China. The last point I also want to make is that, like you said, Sharon, which is that, if you look at China tech from the top to the bottom in the last 6 to 9 months, it almost halved. If you then look at all the headlines, as you say, every day some scary, horror story comes along. This is what I call the point of maximum panic and chaos. Guess what? If everybody is panicking and chaosing, that's the time to go. When everybody is fearful, you should be greedy. Look at what our Charlie Munger did recently. He loaded up on Alibaba shares. Quietly, we see BlackRock, Bridgewaters, Goldman picking up stuff. So to me, I, as always, look at this and say that I think this is a huge buying opportunity, Sharon. Of course, you can't go in sort of without having done homework, and you can't do it because, I just go in. It's not like that. Yeah. So sorry for the long answer.
No, it's great. Now I just want to hold on to what you said. Now's the time to buy China, and just to tell everybody here that using the MIDF Invest app, you can actually buy Chinese companies which are listed in the United States. So you can buy JD, and you can buy Alibaba, and quite a few others, aren't they? Who have a New York listing. So good time to have a look at this. And also, sorry, a reminder that there's a Q&A box, so you can start typing in questions now, and we'll go slowly through the questions and answer them for Benson. Great. As I look at the video you showed, it's quite, China really is the 21st century, right? It really is. It's not even the 21st century, it's science fiction almost, the way things are done, the way things are going in China. So, and in the video, you talked a little bit about the different phases of the internet, and I know we've talked about that as well. So tell us a little bit about when you first came to China. You were a software engineer, and you're a civil engineer, you're a financial engineer, you've done some amazing stuff in Asia and Malaysia throughout the crisis in '97. So what was it you saw in China when you got there? Where China even have an internet yet in 2000? Was there?
Well, it has to go back to '91 when I first went to China. And I always say to people, what did I see then? Nothing. But the fact that there's nothing in terms of IT and automation and everything else, for a country and economy that is clearly going up, it wasn't number 2, it may be number 3 or whatever. An economy that size, what I saw was people were still using manual systems. People were, the most advanced people are using Excel spreadsheets. They think they're very cool and very advanced. No databases. Well, in the 90s, no internet either. Yeah. And so that's why, to me, I said, oh my God, this is just an accident waiting to happen. And then fast forward 10 years to about 2002, when I moved over to China, it was really to say, now with the internet, where suddenly sort of digitization, automation, and everything else is so much cheaper, I think the tipping point has arrived. And this is perfect also at that point, it was after the internet bubble, so everybody is very scared. And China is still very much an unknown quantity, and so therefore also scared. So I look at those two and just say, you know what? I think everybody missed it, or everybody is just so fearful that they dare not take the plunge. Very interestingly, very similar to today, which is that we all know China is advanced, as you say, Sharon. You just need to open your eyes. Meanwhile, people are very fearful because of all the stories. And remember, these stories are not written by the people inside it, okay? I sometimes have this little funny thing, which is, who do you believe the weather report? The captain of the boat, which is in the middle of that weather, or the people on the coast who can see the boat being captained by these ship captains? Or do you actually believe in the people who live thousands of miles away, never been to China, blinkered as to how they think about it, and write their stories? Which one? So to me, it's easy. Go on the boat, go out in the storm, go shoulder to shoulder with the CEO, the captain of the ship, because he is the one who sees it, and his ship is still out there. I think we're pretty safe.
Okay, all right. I mean, it just sounds terrible. Like Evergrande, billions. I mean, I can't remember what the number is, but some staggering number in terms of the debt. And people say, this is bring down the property market, bring down the financial system, the normal doom and gloom stuff. But you think it's under control?
Well, first of all, it has 1 trillion RMB of debt outstanding. 1 trillion RMB. That's scary, okay? That's a fraction of, a meaningful fraction of the foreign reserve of China there. And the earlier you poke that bubble, the safer it is, because if you do it in a year or 2 years' time, when it truly becomes too big to fail, and it truly will have contagion effect, that's too late. I mean, it's like, when do you treat cancer? There's never a good time, but please don't leave it too late, okay? That's how I look at it. I think the other thing is that, is this going to rock the boat? No, there's one critical difference within China. Just like in the old days, there's so many times people said the property bubble will burst, but they forgot one thing. And I learned that in Hong Kong in '97, that property bubble burst because the asset and the liability belongs to different people, okay? So for example, you have a property, you borrowed a mortgage out of it, the property is yours, the mortgage is the bank. Now for the bank, likewise, they themselves have all these mortgages that belongs to them, and then they are owned by people, and they have debt that finance the banks. Different people. Guess what? In China, one side is state-owned enterprise, the other side is private enterprise. But the private enterprise, like Evergrande, they owe money to state-owned bank. Guess what? I always say it's left hand owing to right hand, and because everything goes to the top, then it really is kind of stupid for we call him grandpa, grandpa in the sense that sort of grandpa is in everything, right? So that's why we say that asset and liability of companies are in the same hands, and that's why it's much more controllable within China. So that's why, to me, the way that the Evergrande is evolving most likely will go the way just like Hainan, HNA, the Hainan Airlines, when they, in a sense, dealt with all the bad debt, all the bad assets, and basically divided it up and taken care of by various state-owned enterprises. I think most likely it'll be like that. Yeah.
Okay. That's heartening. That's heartening. And I will take your word for it, because and you are there in Hong Kong and Beijing and being there for 20 years. So I think you know what you're talking about, of course. So let's just move away from this kind of macro view of China and just talk a little bit about what you were doing during the 90s when the great Asian financial crisis of the late 90s, and because you were partly in Malaysia, right? And then after that you moved to China. So tell us a little bit about that, and then how you went from that to investing in tech, and then now and to what you're doing right now.
The 90s was basically private equity era. Internet wasn't there, so we are in, I would say, private equity, as I said. I was very lucky, 95 to 98, I was based in Kuala Lumpur in a four-hand partnership together with Tan Sri Rashid Hussein's RHB, and together with when I used to be with my own sort of US investment firm, private equity firm called Hellman and Friedman.
That's a great name, by the way, Hellman and Friedman. I mean, that's a great name for a firm.
Yeah, I think I call them the best kept secret. And I learned my craft from them. And so I'm very grateful to them as well. And during those 3.5 years, the other two partners were actually Employees Provident Fund, EPF, together with GIC, the counterpart in Singapore. And so it was a four-hand partnership. And I won't say too much of everything that we have done and not done. But one thing that we've done, I think that was pretty good, was that in a sense, we made Dialog, a tiny petrochemical engineering company, into a KLCI listed stock. Why? Because we created this petrochemical storage project together with Petronas in Kerteh on the east coast of mainland Malaysia. And that basically was a 25-year contract. And we were lucky enough, the timing was right. And so we paid off our capital, all our cost within 1.5 years. And so we have 23.5 years of pure profit. And that,
oh my goodness,
that was the start of Dialog. And Dialog, I have a lot of respect for that company. I think likewise, I had a roller coaster ride, 95, 98, you went to the top, you came down. But I was lucky because in a sense, I was outside of Hong Kong looking at Hong Kong. And that gave me a lot of objectivity as well. So that was the 90s. I was doing infrastructure. I was all over, Southeast Asia. I had 3.5 beautiful years in Kuala Lumpur. Those were, I would say, my formative years. And I went back to Hong Kong in 98. Of course, the internet starts coming along, I caught the bug as well, as a software engineer. This is it. I said, this is great. I love this. And also sort of, like I said, I've been watching China throughout that, even though I'm in Malaysia and Southeast Asia, I've always found an excuse almost quarterly to go back and see how everything is starting to come along. And that's why 2002, I jumped ship. I joined Fidelity, and also I moved myself to Beijing. So that was the 90s.
Wow, yeah. Wow. And so Fidelity was also a private equity outfit, because we think of it here as more doing, mutual funds and things. It also.
Yes. Well, again, the public-facing Fidelity is a mutual fund. But behind the scene, of course, we are a big company, and there is a lot of cash sitting on the balance sheet. And so Fidelity itself, for our own balance sheet investing, we've been doing technology investing in the US since 50 years ago. And in Asia, and specifically in China, as I said, since around mid-90s. My partner, he started it, he championed it, and I joined him in 2002. So yeah, Fidelity has a side that you don't know. Fidelity invests in, they own some of the big telecom carriers. They own big power stations. We are in private equity, or alternatives. And it sort of makes sense because their main business is in secondary market. So we can't use the cash to go back into the stock exchange, because you would have absolutely no hedging, right? No, so that's why we need to be hedged. That's why it's all alternatives. So that's Fidelity. And so Fidelity built this PEVC into China Tech since, as I say, since the mid-90s. And then we became singularly focused by 2002. We basically dropped everything and focused entirely on China in 2002. Yes.
Gosh. So that was the time, I guess, when all these new companies were starting in China, right? Well, they're now household names, but at the time, I guess they were very much unknowns. And you picked a couple of winners, and did very well out of them.
Well, Sharon, like red wine, it's all about the vintage. You get the right vintage, 1982. You need to be pretty stupid to not get it. And I think we're just sheer dumb luck. We went up in 2002, 2005. Baidu got listed. The whole Silicon Valley woke up, and the internet came out. So that's why we're quite lucky. Alibaba, we're early in that. We're early in AsiaInfo. We're early in WuXi AppTec. All of these are super unicorns by now. I guess the only other difference that we have made is that we took a very different path. We set a different strategy to say, let's hold on to them for 15 years, because the great CEOs are the most rarest thing. And if you ever can, as we say in Chinese, grab onto them, then don't ever let go. So that served us extremely well. So we've been at Alibaba for more than 20 years, and we've been in others for 15 to 20 years. So long term. And to us, it's not just making money, it's also meaning that we have somebody who is guiding us deep inside China, right at the forefront of technology, eyes wide open with these people. And to me, I sometimes use two different keywords that I use in Venturous now, which is to say, we treat all our investors and investees as our family. And we are all on a journey into the future, because the smart city is the future.
Smart city. So, for many of us, well, for me, certainly until I talked to you, I thought smart cities meant, putting 5G cables, and that's what made a city smart, right? You just give it high-speed internet and that's it. But it's clearly more than that. And, watching your video, it's just quite amazing. But before getting smart cities, going back to what you said about, investing in CEOs. So it is true. A lot of people say, I don't invest in companies, I invest in people and all that kind of stuff. That's actually true for you. You invest in the people rather than the technology or the company.
If you really think about a technology company, you go in there are thousands of people. What do you really see inside that office? You see some very brainy people, very hardworking. They sit in front of the computer, and with the computer to create software and services and others. You take away the people, what do you get? Just a lot of machines, nothing, Everybody can buy machines. But if you take away the machines, the people will still be there. So that's why I always say to people, the biggest unicorn and super unicorn we have seen, the differentiating factor is the CEO, the senior team, the vision, mission, and value, and do they truly live it? And this almost like sort of, I would say, religious fervor to make it happen. And so that's why I always say that it's people. Now, of course, everybody says that it's about the people.
Yeah.
And I have a litmus test for that, which is to say, number one, tell me the secretary of the CEO and every single co-founder. Do you know them? No. Okay. Number one. Number two, how much time do you really spend with them? Is it just quarterly at the board meeting? If that's the case, then you're not with the people. And so that's why we look at it that way, which is that if you truly treat them as your partner, you really ought to spend time with them. Spend time not to drink, not to wine, not to dine, not anything of that. Because the CEO only cares about one thing, which is how do I win this war out there for the market, for penetration and stuff like that. And every day there is, within China, imagine Ali, every day they are fighting with their competitors. And so all they care about is, Benson and your team, can you help me? Okay. Are you good enough? Do you spend time with us? And most importantly, are you with me or against me? Because I've seen so many investors who basically think of their role is, hey, show me the money. Come on. What do you mean you haven't done it? And they start yelling at each other. That's not being in the same boat as the CEO. You are actually across the table from the CEO. And so I think one of the biggest difference between Venturous and everybody else is we are on the same side. We are, as they say, we are on the same side of the aisle of the CEO.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly true. I mean, just looking at the people you have in Venturous, I mean, some of them do come from Alibaba and senior executives from Alibaba and other places. So clearly there must be something in you. Okay, so Benson, let's talk about smart cities and what it is. Tell us what it means, because and how this ties into what you were saying earlier about the different stages of the internet and different stages of things growing.
Well, I would start by saying this, and I'm sure it will resonate with everybody. Since COVID, the world has gone digital. Look at us, Chairman. We are talking to everybody on a digital device, okay?
Yeah,
that would never have happened. I would have flown down to KL, we'll be sitting on stage, and everybody will be out there watching us live, so to speak. And yet today, we're very happy to do this. So the world has gone digital. And like I said, so the digital economy is coming. Now, the first big thing I want to say is, where do we think the centers of digital economy will be? But smart cities. So point number one, smart cities will be the future centers, the future Hong Kong, the future Tokyo, the future New York, the future London of the digital economy. And that's why we got to be there. And another way to say it, that this is a center is, would you ever check into a hotel with no Wi-Fi today?
Yeah.
Kidding me? You'll probably fire your assistant for doing that. Just like I say the same. My daughter is 26-year-old. I think within 10 years, she'll probably say, are you kidding me? Why should I want to live in a dumb city? It will make my work difficult, my life difficult. I can't order this, I can't buy that. And meanwhile, it's not green, okay? So that's why we say that smart city is basically more livable, more sustainable, and more productive. And surprise, surprise, it's the most ESG of everything. Absolutely, okay? We are thinking about green, we are thinking about efficiency, and we are trying to make everybody's lives a little bit better. So that's what we mean by smart cities. Now, another thing I also want to say about smart cities, and this is probably something that nobody knows about it, is that, like I said, there are 800 smart city districts in China that has been upgrading to smart city for the last 10 years.
Wow. So these are new cities or parts of or additions to an existing city? This is a
existing city realizing that they must be in the center of digital economy, demarcate someplace and just say, let's do a smart city. So let's say, take for the example of Kuala Lumpur, we did Putrajaya. It's a new area.
And Cyberjaya as well. Do you remember
and
Cyberjaya?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Is it like
my
that?
times there was Putrajaya, now it's Cyberjaya.
And Cyberjaya.
And there will be new areas, new towns and all that. And you use that as the show town and just say, okay, let's do that first. Whatever works, then I copy across the town and put it back into old buildings. Just like you can renovate old buildings, you can renovate old cities. Because technology is easy. It's software, mostly. It's not about knocking down buildings. You can keep the buildings and just add, just like you don't knock down hotels to add Wi-Fi, right? So yeah. Yeah. So
So,
that's
so
why.
it sounds a bit more. So there's 800 cities in China which have decided to start their own smart city. What does that mean?
It means that 10 years ago, they started networking themselves using internet technology. So hospital became all networked together. So it doesn't matter, if your ambulance happened to be in the wrong hospital that doesn't have your data, you will get it. It will be downloaded into the operating theater. You'll be in safe hands with the surgeon. Okay, so that's why it was networked. And then they started doing networked traffic control. So much so that basically today, if I have a chance to take you to Hangzhou, we can show you the city brain. The city brain, which is almost like a central command center of the whole city, that can coordinate the fire services, the water services, in case there are calamities and natural disasters or even other stuff. Okay, it will control traffic. It will look after that. But basically, just like a big command center, and making sure everything in the city is running smoothly. Okay, running smoothly. So that's really what a smart city is. And you will see it's actually sort of step by step. You don't suddenly, yesterday it was done, tomorrow it's smart because I put in one thing. It doesn't work that way. Every month, every quarter, every year, you add a little bit to it. That then because you added, let's say, 5G, therefore you can start adding AI. You then put in the sensors and IoT is now ready, then 5G can run better with the IoT, and therefore the software comes and all that. So everything, I call it, is like a jigsaw puzzle, and you put different pieces together, and as the pieces come together, it becomes faster and faster, okay, and more convenient and much more productive. And so that's why it ain't going to be done overnight, but you need to get going because it takes a while. City is super complex. And if I may, you asked me initially, what is a smart city? Ultimately, I call it will be a programmable city, meaning that this, your phone will be the remote control to the whole city. And for me, not only will it control my everything that is in my office, but also at home. It can also call for my Uber ride and Didi ride. In the future, probably sort of all of this would be at the phone. And it's already happening, Sharon. People call WeChat the super app. I call it the city app, because if you go into the sub app within WeChat, it's actually all the work, live, and play services within the city. Getting takeouts, ordering a taxi, right? E-commerce, buying stuff, paying for stuff. These are all city services. So that's why quietly, the mobile internet, this mobile device that you think works alone, is starting to be connected to the whole city and working in tandem with everything else. So that's why I call it a programmable city, because you just pick what you want. You would then say, well, for this, I want that. Can I pre-program so that, this, that, and the other? Just like an app store. I think in the future, your phone will have the whole city. It will sit inside an app store, and you pick the ones that you want. For some, you want the basic free service. Others, you want the premium service because you care about it. Yeah.
Gosh, okay. Well, Benson, we've got a couple of questions already in, so I'll just take a break now and go through some of those questions, and then we'll go back to this idea of what a smart city is, and certainly how Venturous is investing in smart cities. Because maybe later, if you just describe some of the things you've invested in, maybe everyone will get a slightly better understanding of what it means to be an investor in smart cities. So, someone, Denver's Kara says, I saw your promo video on digitalization of almost everything. How do you address privacy and protection of the personal sphere of life? And I'll read it. The second question we've got is, does Meta or Facebook have anything to do with smart cities or digital economy? Let's start with those two first. Yeah.
Well, data privacy is crucial. That's why China is taking it very, very seriously. I would say if you're 5 years ago, yes, it's very much more laissez-faire, as I say, minimum regulation so everybody can start moving ahead. But now that, payment is so prevalent and everything else is so prevalent, the government says, okay, it's all done now. Now, let's be a little bit more grown up about it. And let's make sure that we protect all our citizens, because everything that you do online is, in a sense, completely open. Your whole life, in a sense, you are completely, shall we say, naked. And so that's why data privacy is going to be the bedrock. Now, you say, well, in that case, then China is the most behind, isn't it? Wait a minute. China actually now have a set of rules on data privacy. And guess who they modeled it off? EU.
Okay.
The European Union. Because European Union has the most strict personal data privacy laws in the whole world, and they mirrored off of that, number one. Number two, if you then ask one of my CEO of iSoftStone, I say, hey, you process 8% of all the city data, something as big as almost the same size as Ali and all that. Hey, can we get some of that and do some marketing? He said, are you kidding me? I'll go to jail for that. I said, really? He said, yeah, because this is not just commercial law, it is criminal law for people to abuse data. Okay, so they are serious about it now. That's why in a sense, you see very stringent regulation in Ali and other big platforms. Hey, like our audience who asked for it, now we're giving it to you. Okay, and I think the third thing is that there are actually very, very easy executable software ways to make and protect data privacy. The first one, and I'll only give you the name of it, but watch it later, is what I call decapitated data. Decapitated data means that the data pack of you doing something, we chop off the head, meaning that nobody knows who it is. We then give a 256-bit encrypted data into it, so that the system only knows statistically who was there. But remember, in big data, statistics is good enough. I don't need to know Benson was there. All I need to know is, a male of this social standing with this sort of preferences was there at the mall. And therefore, at 4 p.m. every day, we better have something that catches their eye, because there's so many of them around. Okay, statistics is enough. And that's why decapitated data is very, very useful. And it's, and of course, I mean, in national emergencies and other ways, there are ways for the government to override, but then, hey, that's where the legislative and law and abuses needs to be sorted out.
But that wasn't always the case in China, right? I mean, there was a time in the earlier, yes, more where
I would say even 5 years ago, it was all laissez-faire, as I said.
Laissez-faire,
okay. And so the balance was, back then it was, we can be very strict, but if that stops, it become prevalent, then what are we doing? Because if you don't have it, why even argue about data privacy? Now we have it, then we can start arguing about data privacy. Yeah.
Okay. So Maslisa Osman has asked, you need to help Malaysia with our water system desperately. We are far, far away from a smart brain city. So how does a smart city deal with water?
Our strategic partner is Arup, which is one of the top, I would say, town planners in the world, and they are one of the best civil engineers and designers.
ARUP Arup, right? The
ARUP Arup,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah, huge.
So one of the things they do is what they call a sponge city. Sponge city is basically for all the rain that's collected through buildings and other places. In order for you to know it, so first of all, you need the infrastructure to collect it. Secondly, you need to recycle it. Thirdly, you need IoT sensors to monitor it so that you know how to deal with it. So these are, whatever you can measure, you can start doing something about it. So that's why smart city, the data is so important. But the data is only first part. You then need other ways to recycle it. And that's why I kept saying, you do what, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. And if you start doing some of it, the others become easier. And water is something that is huge, of course, but it's definitely something that is being addressed in smart city. And like I said, I mean, it has to be sustainable. So water definitely, like energy, would be another thing that is very key to smart cities.
Okay. So Benson, I mean, just to get a better understanding of
Sure.
what Venturous does and smart cities. So let's name a couple of the companies which you've invested in the smart city area and what they do. What
Yeah. So very simply, Venturous Group is China's #1 Citytech group. We raised a record-breaking Series A, 131 million, beginning of this year. And what we do is make cities smarter. And what we mean is, like I said, sustainable, livable, and productive. How do we do it? Using technology. What technology, you ask me? We think there are 4 must-have technology in a smart city. To make it smart, of course, you need computing, okay? We call it big data, data processing, AI, data centers, everything, that whole thing. That's where we have in iSoftStone. iSoftStone is a $2 billion revenue company every year. 70,000 engineers working in 170 smart city districts all over China, together with its other sort of subsidiaries. Meanwhile, because of that, they are very good at what I call at scale, meaning citywide smart computing. So that's company #1. That's a must-have. Otherwise, how can you be smart, right? You have to have computing. Now, the corollary of when you start computing so much is that you give off heat. That's why you touch your mobile phone at at night after you have talked on it for 2 hours. It's very hot. The biggest problem for data center is that they give off a lot of heat. And if the whole city becomes a smartphone or a data center, then clearly energy becomes crucial. So the second company we have is we have 22% in one of the leading energy networking company in China. And what do? Very simply, the system, if you put it into building, instantly they can reduce energy costs by 1/6 to 1/3. And it's very, very good. Now, on the city side, it's smart buildings and smart city management. Buildings is the Lego block of the city. A city is basically hundreds of thousands of buildings. So that's why if we can do smart buildings and we can do smart city management, then we're done. And so likewise, we have a company that we are forming a joint venture with Arab that we are doing smart buildings, what we call putting a brain into every building in the world. And the second one is smart city management. Like I said before, can you put a control center so that 20 people can manage a district of 1 million people? We did it 3 years ago. And the city councils are very, very happy. So happy because they point to the indicators. That particular community, after we used that system, energy came down 20%, crime rate came down 80%, and the satisfaction of everybody living in that community went up 50%. So
this is incredible. This is really science fiction stuff. So you got a control center where these people look at all these big screens and they just run the city.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. If you go into, say, the Twin Towers in KL, you will have a command center right there in the basement.
Yeah, but that's for one building then. So you're talking about a whole city, right?
But what I'm saying is the same idea.
Mm-hmm.
If you're comfortable having somebody running your Twin Tower, which truly makes it safe, right? And efficient, right? But you need somebody to make it safe. And I think the same, yes, there are problems with privacy, but no, I mean, it's almost like having, policemen. Policemen are a little bit intrusive to our privacy, but would you rather live in a city with no policemen, or would you rather live in a city with policemen? So there is a balance, absolutely.
How did you bring down crime by 80%? How does a smart city do that?
Just because everyone knows there are cameras,
Wow,
much more
okay.
cameras.
Right. So you can't hide. You can't. If you do something bad, someone will know you did it. It's really easy.
Yeah, I mean, you can say it's a surveillance state, but there is a balance. You can't. The beauty is that's why I kept saying that there are 800 of these, and very quickly there'll be so many districts. And guess what? You would pick a district just like you pick a housing complex. I don't like them. They are too intrusive. They stare at me all the time. So I'm going to move to the next district. Voila.
Right.
That number, diversity of districts actually become the checks and balance so that each district will say, yeah, I want safety, but no, I want privacy. And how do I balance that? Yeah.
And it's happening now, right? We're not talking about the future. It's happening right now already in China.
Yeah, like I
described.
said, it's happening in 800 of these city districts, and they are all experimenting, finding the balance between, just like what we said, the safety and the privacy and everything else. But the beauty is that it's all happening, and it started 10 years ago. And the same can be done in Malaysia. I think this is so early days in all of this that everybody's just literally just off the starting point. And that's why I'm so excited, because I think by getting involved in ventures, companies, cities, all get to learn about what others are doing, and therefore hopefully not make the same mistakes and hopefully speed up themselves. That's why it's the early innings, as they say. The first 10 meters in a marathon.
Wow. No, we have many property developers, well, not many, a few property developers who have logged in today to listen to this. So are you telling them that it's possible for them to do a smart city in Malaysia now? And if it's possible to do that?
Yes, of course. Now, yes, but in the sense that how do you do a district? You need consensus. The government working with the developers together with the residents somehow form a consensus, say the government have to take the lead because this is so complex, right? Cyberjaya, I don't know how big that is, but that's definitely hundreds of buildings, tens of thousands of IT departments and companies, and millions of phones, and you need to integrate all of them, all the systems, everything. So it's very, very, very complex. You have to have somebody. Just like, just like the old days when the government planned for all the highways. So now this is all the digital highways. You can't have something and just say, oh, let market forces do that. No, come on, right? So, and then the businesses have to make money out of it. So that's why the whole thing has to work in all three levels. And I think that's actually the gating issue. It's not the technology. It is whether you have somebody who can, in a sense, motivate everybody and start moving ahead. Now, for developers, the answer to that is let's not be so big in our ambition. Just go back to the little complex that you're building, 1 building, 5 building in a complex. Make it more livable, sustainable, productive. That's why we start with smart building, because that's so small and having only one owner that you can actually do something and use that as a pilot. If you can do that, then you can do something bigger, start with a building and then, a complex, and then from that, a street and then a district. But I think that's where the developers can gradually gain confidence. Oh, I know that, and not waste money on things that actually doesn't work. Sometimes I say, Chairman, is that this is almost like 97, 98 in the internet era when everybody is experimenting. This is not the time to start too big yet, because you may completely get it wrong. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. Well, we have a few minutes left. So one comment here is that how advanced China is, and as well as all the COP26, stuff which China signed out to, and carbon neutral. So that's good to hear. Food security. Do smart cities have anything to do with food security? There's a question from Nadia.
Food security, basically food going through supply chains. And what is being built in all these smart cities is we are building these smart supply chains. You know, the trucks, the warehouses, even the thing, for example, one of the key areas we look at is cold chain, cold supply chain, because that is usually perishable and therefore needs a lot of monitoring. So therefore they can afford to have, you know, sensors and everything else. So it's all happening in the supply chain. I think in the future, what will happen is that you'll be able, just like you'll be able to track where that piece of meat came from. And throughout the whole sort of so-called full service history of that piece of meat from where it is to here, or that piece of vegetable, and so that you can track the whole thing. Of course, you won't check it, but behind the scene, the machines in the kitchen, when they receive that, checks the other machine, which is the supply chain machine, who then checks back to the warehouse, the truck, and everything else. And if it all checks out, then bingo, you know, food security. And also the other point about food security is, of course, the production of it. And this is why China is focusing so much on allowing internet and technology to go into the villages, into agriculture, and all of that, to try to, in a sense, number one, expand the production, but also expand the production exactly right for what is needed in the cities. So a lot is happening, but again, in the past, remember, nobody knows, right? So everything is guesswork. So now with all the IoTs and sensors and measurements, suddenly you may have real-time knowledge of both supply and demand.
Yeah, because a couple of years ago, there were all these food safety scares in China, right? People were worried about you know, how safe the food was, and now technologies seems to be solving that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, there are many things that are still, in a sense, to be fixed in China. When I say it's advanced, it doesn't mean that China has everything. No, I mean, China is so many, in a sense, it's a 1.4 billion population country. It's just crazy. I mean, the depth and the breadth, the complexity, the things that are not right yet are so much. So that's why the government is taking a strong hand to try to get it to the next stage. I call it breaking through the middle income trap that kept Japan stalled for 2-3 decades. I mean, that is the biggest bad dream for China, that they go into a stall mode, a middle class stall mode, just like a la Japan. Yeah, that's a big.
Well, I know, but given the kind of innovation going on there, it seems unlikely. So, Benson, we have just a very few minutes more left. So maybe if to close, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about Venturesome, what you're doing. I mean, you invested some of your own money in there. You also got money from outside investors. I'll let you tell everybody how much you put in, because it's a huge number of your own money. But what's the plan? What's the plan? What's the plan? What's the plan with Venturesome? What's the plan? Yeah.
Like I say, Ventures is trying to. Smart City is the 3rd generation internet. City Internet is that. And if history is the guide, we have only about 5 years to do that in. So that's why we built Ventures to be inclusive of all the investors and going into technology and building ecosystems and all that. And of course, in order to do that, we need a lot of money. That's why Series A was already 131 million. But we didn't take it from the usual typical sort of financial institutions who are purely investors. We took it from family office that have business empires behind it, because we want them to be our capital partners. Okay. And I also say that, well, I don't mind saying it. I mean, 131 million, I'm the biggest shareholder, meaning I actually put in the most money. I'd rather not say the figure. I'm embarrassed about it. But I'm the big shareholder. I put in the most money. I put in the most money because I just think that it's easier for me to explain to all my other sort of investors when anything goes south, I can say, okay, come on, give me a break. I actually lost more money than you did. So it's honestly a innocent mistake. So I'm the biggest one. And then we have another institutional investor that has come in for 35 million. It's a listed China Special Situation Fund. They put in 35 million. So they trust me. They believe in the vision. The third one is actually the ex-COO of Alibaba. The fourth one is actually one CEO of one of the major tech companies. So again, all of these are people who truly believe that this is not only going to make money for everyone, but we are building the future and we're going to do good and do well. So that's why we're doing ventures like this. And like I said, if you want to do 5-8 years to do cities, you can't do it by yourself. You have to get everybody involved. So that's what we're doing.
Brilliant. Thank you, Benson. So, all the best with MVNF. I'm sure it'll do well. And thank you for the stock tips. We will buy. We will go off and buy.
Because, I mean, it's going to be volatile, right?
Yeah, it'll be volatility. But now sounds like a good time as any to go buy China tech. So, you can't. It's hard to buy China direct, but you can always buy China through the US listed companies. But it's fantastic speaking to you, Benson. All the very best. And thank you everybody else who tuned in, and thank you for all the questions. So thank you. Bye. Bye, Benson. Nice to see you. Bye. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Let's leave now. Thanks. Bye.